Welcome back to talknorth.com. Thank you for listening. If you can, please download before you listen. It helps our business. I'd also like to thank our producer, Brandon Morton, and let you know if you'd like to sponsor this program or any of the programs on the network, you can reach me at jsouhan47@gmail.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Preps Today with John Millea. I am John Millea. Mr. Jim Souhan is traveling on assignment this week, so I'm going to go solo on this week's podcast. There's some great stuff to talk about. We kind of got the fall sports in our rear view mirror now. We're on to winter sports and some really neat things happening. You know, not so much game-wise. The winter seasons are just getting going, but I've been able to see some neat things, and I'll talk about some of those today. Let's start this podcast with two Minnesota sporting legends. First one we all know, Lindsay Whalen. I was out in her hometown of Hutchinson one night last week when they actually named the gym Whalen Gymnasium. They've done a $45 million project at Hutchinson High School, a lot of new touches. Just it's a great facility. And they revamped the old gym where Lindsay grew up playing basketball, and it's really a first-class place. And they really did it well. The Hutchinson girls basketball team opened the season against Annandale, so they had a really great ceremony before the game with some speakers from the school and the community. Lindsay talked a little bit and was typical Lindsay, very down to earth, thanked everybody over and over. The varsity team wore warm-up shirts that all they had on the front and the back was one number, 13. That's Lindsay's number since high school. And they sat at center court while the ceremony was going on. They had video tributes from people who couldn't be there, including Andy Rosberg, her high school coach, who still coaches the football team there. And when it came time to unveil the sign above the gym door, it was covered in a black cloth. And some seventh grade girls basketball players from Hutchinson helped Lindsay do that. That was a neat touch. And it's really interesting. She signed her letter of intent with the Gophers in that gym. Her jersey was retired in that gym when she was a senior at the University of Minnesota. And here she is, the head coach of the Gophers, and she's got them off to a great start, 7-0. And if you want to read a little more about that, go to John's Journal on mshsl.org. I wrote a story about that, and you can see tons of photos from that night in Hutchinson on the MSHSL Facebook page. Today's other sporting legend, maybe not as well known as Lindsay Whalen, but somebody I know very well, Mike Bialka, has been writing about sports in Brainerd and the Brainerd area for 40 years. He grew up in Brainerd. He has announced he's going to retire as the sports editor of the Brainerd Dispatch. January 1st will be his last day. And I've talked to Mike about this. There's a story on John's Journal about Mike. I talked to people in Brainerd and people who've come through Brainerd and got to know Mike. And what struck me after talking to Mike and all these other people, Mike's kind of like George Bailey. That's the Jimmy Stewart character in It's a Wonderful Life. Mike has basically had his head down for 40 years, done great work, just as hard a working guy as I know. And he didn't know the impact. I don't think he really knew the impact he had on people until people learned about his retirement. And he told me he started getting emails and texts and phone calls, and it really, I think it stunned him, and he didn't realize the great things he's done. And, when you've got your head down, working hard, churning out the copy, putting out the daily paper, that's I can understand that. But Mike's a great person, really talented journalist. He's really going to be missed in Brainerd. I'm sure going to miss him. And some of the people up there said he'll never be replaced because he's a guy who you can't replace Mike and all the work he's done. So he is going to retire. And I look forward to hanging out with him even whenever he is retired. He's not planning to move away. He and his wife Judy might spend some time in warmer places in the winter, but he's not moving out of his hometown. So there's a story up on John's Journal about Mike too. He sent me a great photo. I asked him if he had any photos of himself, kind of in a work setting, and he sent me a photo of himself shaking hands with the late great Harmon Killebrew. So hats off to Mike Bialka. Job well done, and good luck in retirement. I want to say just a little personal note to Barnesville coach Brian Strand is having heart surgery this year. I wrote about Brian and his team during the playoffs and the Prep Bowl. This guy, he's 45 years old. He's had quite a year of ups and downs. He had a stroke last March, a serious stroke. Recovered in time to coach the football team to a state runner-up finish. And now this week he's having heart surgery. The reason for the stroke was he had a tiny hole in the back of his heart. So this week he didn't want to do this. This is how football coaches think. He didn't want to do this till after football season was over, and he scheduled it for the week after the Prep Bowl. So that tells you how much football means to Brian Strand. And if you want to see a video story about Brian, I interviewed him for a story on Minnesota Prep Spotlight. It aired Sunday night on Channel 45. And if you go to prepspotlight.tv/mshsl, you can see that show and that interview with Brian Strand from Barnesville. Good luck, good health to Brian. Thank a ref category this week. Congrats to MSHSL Coordinator of Officials, Jason Nickleby. You might have seen a tweet that I retweeted from someone in our office who works with Jason, Mary Heiss, who also works with our officials, and they both do a great job. Jason was part of the crew for the Big Ten football championship game between Ohio State and Northwestern. He's a very young official who's doing very great things on a high level. So way to go, Jason Nickleby. One football coaching note, Ed Creamers has stepped down as the football coach at Virginia. I've gotten to know Ed over the years. Good guy, did a great job up there. Big shoes to fill with the Virginia football job. Let's talk about our sponsor real quick. All these shows, if you listen, you know, are brought to you by Gourmet Parlor Pizza, our great friends up in Royalton, Minnesota. Check out Cub Foods, Coburn's, and Kowalski's in your neighborhood. They may be the select places where you can buy Gourmet Parlor Pizza items in the freezer case. They're great stuff, and their specialty is helping you fundraise for your group. They have tons and tons, dozens and dozens of items you can choose from to sell. You go to their website, gourmetparlorpizza.com. Print off the list of items, take that around to all your groups and families and neighborhoods, and you'll make some great profits for your group. They've got more than 30 items to sell. Each one will give your group a profit of $3 to more than $5 a pizza. They do sports teams, dance teams, prom parties, after school things, your American Legion Club, your VFW, any group that wants to raise some money. Selling pizzas, this is the place to do it. So go to gourmetparlorpizza.com, or you can give them a call at 888-584-5930. Thanks again to our friends at Gourmet Parlor Pizza in Royalton. A few winter sports notes here, everybody. A good friend of mine is Chad Courier. He's a sports writer at the Mankato Free Press. And in a rarity, he's also a high school basketball official, and a very good one. I give him a hard time, but I've seen Chad work, and he's a good official. He's been doing it a long time, very experienced. He wrote a column in the Mankato Free Press basically telling fans, these are some of the things you need to know before you scream at the officials. He's great on Twitter. It's a running joke. Fans will yell over the back. Well, there's no violation. That's called over the back. There's contact and there's not contact. And he goes through a lot of these things in this column. If you go to the Mankato Free Press website, look for this column by Chad Courier. He talks about the over and back rules, traveling, and the new restricted arc in the lane that helps with the charge block calls. Really good things for all basketball fans to remember. I'm smart enough to know I don't know as much as officials do, so I've never barked at officials. And Chad has a great perspective here, being a sports writer and a basketball official. I encourage anybody interested to go see that. If you scroll back through my Twitter account, you'll find a tweet linking to that. It's really worthwhile. A couple of wrestling notes. Right off the bat here, we had a big duel between Simley and Apple Valley. Simley's ranked number 2 in Class 2A. Apple Valley's ranked number 2 in Class 3A, and the 2A team beats the 3A team. Simile beats Apple Valley 37-24 in a big early season wrestling duel. There's a lot of wrestling to go, but that's a positive sign for Simile, and we know Apple Valley is going to be good. They always are. And the number 1 ranked teams, these are from the Guillotine, the wrestling magazine that does a great job. Your number 1 ranked teams are Shakopee in 3A, Cass and Manorville in 2A, and Tracy Milroy Ballatin, Westbrook Walnut Grove in 1A. That's 3 hyphens and a slash. Tracy Milroy Ballatin / Westbrook Walnut Grove, number 1 in Class 1A wrestling. We had a big day of girls basketball Saturday at the Breakdown Tip-Off Classic at Hopkins. They had, I think, 17 girls basketball games on Saturday over 2 courts. The big one was a rematch of last year's Class 4A state championship game in which Eastview beat Hopkins. This time it was the other way around. Hopkins looks really, really strong. They're ranked number 1 in 4A. Eastview was number 3 before this game, and Hopkins won pretty handily, 75-48. The aforementioned Lindsay Whalen was there, as were tons of other college coaches. And, the big timer is Paige Beckers, who's now a junior at Hopkins. She's one of the top recruits in the country. Gino Oriema, the Connecticut coach, they joke at Hopkins, he's been at Hopkins High School more than some of the faculty and students have, because he'd love to get Paige Beckers on his team. And also at that Breakdown USA Tip-Off Classic, we had a state record set. McKenna Hoffschild, she's a senior at Prior Lake. She scored 63 points in a game, and that's a new state record. So congratulations to her. There'll be a similar day of basketball, boys basketball, this coming Saturday at Hopkins. If you go to Breakdown Sports USA, you can see the list of games. They do a great job, put together great matchups of some of the best teams. And it's not just the big schools. They bring in a lot of small schools and do a great job of all-day basketball. It's always a good I always know the first 2 Saturdays in December, I'll be hanging out at the Hopkins gym all day just to watch a lot of great basketball. A couple of final notes here before we wrap up this week's podcast. We have an interesting competition going on in a company called Great Mats. This is a flooring company that specializes in gymnastics equipment, and gymnastics flooring and padding. They've got a thing going on their website to name the National Gymnastics Coach of the Year. There's 2 finalists. One is the gymnastics coach at UCLA. So this is a big-time college gymnastics coach. The other finalist is Steve Zamzo. If you don't know who Steve is, he's the gymnastics coach at Detroit Lakes High School in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, home of course, Adam Thielen. So you got your UCLA coach and your Detroit Lakes High School coach, the 2 finalists for this Coach of the Year competition. And I believe it's online voting. I know who I'm cheering for there. Go Steve, go Detroit Lakes. And we had at last look here, one Twitter question. This concerns the Prep Bowl. In past years, we had a company that did webcasting of the Prep Bowl, and they sold DVDs of the games. Well, this year, Channel 45 KSTC, which is our longtime TV partner at the high school league, they broadcast the state tournaments. They are not offering DVDs. I don't know why they're not. I haven't talked to anybody over there, but Dave Peterson asked a question that I've been asked a lot. Why doesn't Prep 45 have DVDs of the Prep Bowl for the public to purchase? That's a good question. I think those things would sell. I assume it's just a process issue. They decided that maybe the money they might make wouldn't cover the cost and the time of doing that. I don't know. I'll try to find an answer. Maybe for next week's podcast, I'll try to find an answer. That will wrap it up this week on Preps Today with John Millea. Again, I want to thank our good friends up in Royalton, Gourmet Parlor Pizza, for being the original and longtime sponsor of this show. Always great stuff going on in high school sports. And next week, you never know, maybe there'll be 2 voices on the podcast with myself and Jim Suhan upon his safe return. That does it for this week, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening.